Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another Beyond Access series session. Tonight, we're excited to be back with our literacy track lead, Lavinia Mancuso, the executive director of Everyone Reading. And tonight's topic is cracking the code of English for English language learners. So we're really excited to present this session tonight, as in every night. We will be presenting, and you will have the ability to ask your questions using the Q&A function of the Zoom. So you'll see that on your screen as a button that has two speech bubbles with the letters Q and A. Type in your questions throughout the presentation, and then we'll also dedicate some time at the end to answer some of these live. Also, tonight we have some polls that we're going to be asking. So we ask that you do participate in those. They are all yes or no questions. They are anonymous, so no one sees what your answer is. So please just answer them truthfully and honestly so that we can have this experience together. I think those are all of the announcements to share with you all at this moment. I will have more at the end, but without any further ado, I'd like to introduce tonight's speaker. She's been the lead for the last 4 months on literacy, Lavinia Mancuso.
Good evening. I am so happy to see all of you, although I can't see you. There are two polls that two questions that Jose is going to ask you, and he will tell you how to enter the answers. And in the meantime, I will share my screen with you. Can you see that, folks?
No.
Not yet.
Now?
No. Click on the green share screen icon in Zoom, and then you should be able to select your PowerPoint presentation.
I have to move something out. I have this thing about the volume. Jose, are you polling everybody, I hope?
While you start sharing your screen, I'll run the poll. And so for those of you who are joining us, the first poll is a 2-question poll, and it should be popping up on your screen now. And the questions are, do you speak mostly English at home? So question number 1 is, do you speak mostly English at home? And then question number 2 is your child an English language learner? So
got it. Lavinia, if you can click where it says play from beginning, and we should be good to go. Perfect.
Okay, here we are. So I want to tell you a little bit about this presentation. It's mostly about language learning and language, but all of us want to encourage you to, if you speak a language other than English at home, please continue to do so. Continue to enrich that language. Continue to develop your child's bilingualism. School will take care, school and social life will take care of the English sooner or later. But you have a valuable resource at home, and please cherish that and hang on to that. So our last presentation was about oral language. And tonight's session is cracking the code of English. I want to remind.
So Lavinia
just was asking for responses to the poll, Jose.
Absolutely. So Lavinia, it looks like tonight, the majority of our parents tonight and families mostly speak English at home, but about 20% of them say that they don't mostly speak English at home. And then for our children, it looks like about 33% of children and families with here tonight are English language learners.
Okay, well, that is an interesting picture. So I will try to keep that in mind as I chug through this presentation. So bear with me. I'm going to try to slow myself down so that the interpreters can interpret for me, because I'm usually too fast a speaker. One of the things that we have to always keep in mind is that every language is a code. I am making sounds coming out of my mouth, and later, and you see symbols on the screen. And it is your responsibility as the listener or the reader to make sense of this. So if you sit on the subway and someone is speaking your language, you can't rule them out. I can't rule out English no matter how crazy it is. And I have to pay attention to Spanish. But if I'm sitting next to someone speaking Albanian, that is impossible for me. I could listen as hard as I want. I cannot make sense of those sounds coming out of their mouths. However, one thing you must keep in mind is that good language skills in one language support second language learning. So if English is your first language, develop it as well as you can, because when your kids are about to take a foreign language, they will be much better off. And the same with another language. If you are speaking Mandarin or Spanish or anything else, strengthening that first language will have tremendous benefits on the second language that they learn. I wanted to go over the benefits of bilingualism. One is, they call it cognitive flexibility. That means that you can see things from more than one angle, that you know that this book isn't a book in its DNA, that book is a label for this thing. And there are many other labels for other things. And then they're talking about executive function. Executive function is organizational skills. And if you're bilingual, apparently you have better executive functioning skills, and you especially know who to talk to in what language and when to speak that language. And that is a tremendous benefit for organizational skills. This is all research-based. This isn't Lavinia making it up because she was a bilingual teacher. There's an academic advantage with good instruction. Bilingual students outscore everybody else on tests, on college acceptance, on college completion. And when they finish, if they are truly bilingual, they usually get better pay because they have value added to their job. And then now they're coming out with this research that is still a little questionable, that there are delays in onset of Alzheimer's. And so that is what I'm really concerned about. And then there's the benefit that you know 2 languages and you know 2 code systems. Why not? So moving on, we all know the story about Rumpelstiltskin. The father presented his daughter to the king as a person who could spin straw into gold. And she had the help of a little elf who helped her to do that. And things were going along just fine. She was spinning straw into gold. The king was very happy, and she was going to be expecting a baby. And Rumpelstiltskin, the elf, showed up and said, I will stop spinning straw into gold unless you give me your firstborn son. And she wept and cried, and he took pity. And he said, if you can guess my name, I will not demand your firstborn child. So she guessed and guessed and guessed and guessed, and she couldn't guess because you can't guess those things. But her assistant heard him talking about his name and told the princess Rumpelstiltskin's name. And that is the story of language. And then she said, "You are Rumpelstiltskin?" And he said, "Okay, you got it." So learning a new language is not a guessing game. It's not a creative activity. You cannot just make up a new language. You have to be taught this new language. And it takes a while. The research is that it takes about 6 years to become truly bilingual. So we have to have patience. And there are two kinds of language. One is receptive language. You are listening to me and you are reading the screen. You are receiving information. But when you are speaking, I am expressing myself. I am speaking, and I wrote this writing on the screen. So that is expressive language. And what is very important is the difference between concepts and labels. For instance, I'm going to talk about this later. This is a screwdriver, right? Now, I can give you this label in English. It's a screwdriver. This tool has many different labels in many different languages. But if you don't know what a screwdriver is or what it's used for, the label is meaningless. You need to know the concept of what a screwdriver is and how it works. And that's where parents come in. In any language, the more concepts you can give your children, the more experience you can have with all different things and talk about it in any language, then you are developing the concepts. And all the teachers have to do is put the new labels on them. And then we have the whole difference between spoken and written language. Spoken language is innate in your first language. We all learn it. Written language has to be taught. Okay, here we are all English language learners. English has the biggest lexicon, that means the number of words, of all the languages in the world, because we are very hospitable. We're always taking in new words. We have new words from technology. We have new words from slang. We have new words from other languages. We're constantly stealing words from all different languages. And so the English language has grown by 70% since I was in school. My own language has almost doubled since I was in school. Think about that. And I think we have another poll. Do we?
It's coming up in a little bit if you change the
Okay.
slide. Yes, we're having
Now-
another poll right now, Lavinia.
So I started talking, these are the modalities of language.
So-
Listening and speaking. If you, as a baby, if you have no impairments, if you're not deaf or have other intellectual impairments, you will learn your first language. And you will learn it in a very didactic way. We'll talk about that. But reading and writing, and everybody in the world who doesn't have impairments speaks a language and understands a language. But not everybody reads and writes. And so reading and writing needs an alphabet, but it also needs someone to teach you to do it. And then there's the silent language of gestures and facial expressions that you have to learn how to read. And they are sometimes different in different languages. Like I learned that waving can be different in different languages. Coming, come here, or come here. So you have to learn those gestures. You have to learn those facial expressions. And that is also part of communication. Remember, language first and foremost is communication. Now we have a poll.
Yeah,
Yeah,
here's the poll.
absolutely.
Great.
So that's a great segue to our next poll. And the question for this poll is, does your child watch television in English? So does your child watch television in English? And folks are answering it. And as they're answering, it looks like everyone is saying absolutely yes. And I will just add, you know, as someone who grew up in a Spanish speaking household, I definitely growing up watched television in English whenever I was able to get the remote away from my grandma. So it was always, you know, let's find the Disney Channel in English, even when I was still learning English. So that question really resonates with me, Lavinia.
The reason I asked this question is because if your child watches television in English, put the captions on the television in English. If your child or you are watch television in another language, put the captions on in that language. It's a way of getting kids to read. And it's also, if your kids know how to read, it's a way of connecting the print with the speech on the screen. And it's very cheap and easy. You just press one button. So be sure to do that. At the end of this presentation, put on the captions. Why is it not moving? Maybe because the poll
Click
wasn't there.
on the PowerPoint and then just click anywhere in the PowerPoint. There you go.
There you go.
Now you can use your arrow.
Okay. Good. Okay, here we are. Now, I also wanted to reassure everyone, if whatever their kids knew before the pandemic did not go away, they may or may not have learned a lot of new things, but what they had before the pandemic is there. If they learned it, it's stored in long-term memory and it will come back. So I have to tell you about my personal things here. So I am new to technology. As you can see, I am almost clueless because I have not learned it well and I have not practiced it enough. So it's not in my long-term memory. I'm still operating with it in my working memory, which is what's going on tonight. I'm trying to figure it out tonight. However, I supervise beginning teachers for Hunter College. I observe them. And one of my teachers is a fabulous geometry teacher. Now, I haven't been in a geometry class for many, 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 many years, but I was a good geometry student and it's in my long-term memory. So after looking at a few of his lesson plans, it came back. And that will happen with your children. What they knew before the pandemic will come back. It may take some time, but it will come back. And their teachers will be sure to make it come back. That will be the job of the teachers, not only to teach new things, but to bring back all the things the kids knew before the pandemic. So relax. If your child learned it before the pandemic, it's there in long-term memory and it will come back. And we're talking about languages as well. If kids have not been speaking a whole lot of English during the pandemic, whatever they learned is there and it will come back. As soon as they get back to school and back to the playground, shoom, it'll be back. So I am going to experiment with Stephen Krashen and the input hypothesis. In order for learning to take place. What I have to input to you, you have to take in. And the input has to be comprehensible. So I am going to stop the share for a moment and hope that I can get it back with the help of my friends here. Okay, so input has to be comprehensible. So if I say to you, this is a pen, you could say, what is she talking about? Is it the color? Is it her hand? Is it the movement? Is this thing called this is a pen? It has to be comprehensible. So here we go. Pen, 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 pen. Not a pen, not a pen. Now, there are all kinds of exercises that you do with that. Is this a pen, yes or no? But basically it has to be comprehensible. If you want to teach colors, you can do it the same way. Black, 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 not black. And then you may want to give a written reinforcement to that color. So in English, and this is very important for young children, in English, we always start at the top on the left side. And we start with sounds. What's the first sound of black? B. Down, up, and around. Second sound of black? Boo. Next sound of black? Ah. Last sound of black? K. Now we have black in a pen, and we have black on the board. I wrote this in black, not because I want them to remember that it's black, but because I want everything to be written in black so that it's bold, so that kids can read it. And as a parent and as a teacher, if you're listening in, please, no pink. Write everything in big, black, bold letters so kids can read it. Okay, then I started to talk about meaningfulness. I can teach you screwdriver, 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 but if you don't know what to do with it, it's not meaningful to you. So it has to be something that's meaningful to you. And so we have to choose our vocabulary either for things that we know are meaningful to the kids and just put new labels on them, or we have to take the time to make new things meaningful. Now, we cannot assume, I mean, the kids may be construction workers, right? They know more about screwdrivers than anybody, but we cannot assume that they either know things or that they don't know things. And that is true of parents and kids. Haven't you been surprised at what your kids know? And also, haven't you been surprised when you think your kids know something and they don't? So, meaningful, comprehensible, and sufficient repetitions. Over and over and over again. That's how we learn language, by saying things over and over and over again. And then there's the affective filter. The affective filter is just a fancy name for the Teflon shields that we put up every time we have to learn something new. Like I have the Teflon shield up, I have my affective filter about this technology. It makes me nervous. And here, fortunately, I have people who are going to help me with this. So we have to be very careful with kids to make sure that they feel that they can do it, that they're not so anxious that they put down their affective filter, their Teflon shield, and don't actually you know, they're too afraid to learn. So I wanted to talk about repetition, and I wanted to talk about picture books, because if you've been to these sessions, you know I love picture books. Picture books are often very repetitive, but they can be very sophisticated as well. So I am going to read parts of I Want My Hat Back. This is about a bear who he loves his hat and he can't find it. So he says, my hat is gone. I want it back. And he asks various animals, have you seen my hat? And then they tell him, no, I haven't seen your hat. And he says, okay, thank you anyway. So he asks a variety of animals and they tell him different things, but they say, no, have you seen my hat? No, what does it look like? No. And then he comes upon this little rabbit who happens to be wearing a hat. And he says to the rabbit, have you seen my hat? And the rabbit says, no. Why are you asking me? I haven't seen it. I haven't seen any hats anywhere. I would not steal a hat. Don't ask me any more questions. And then the bear says what he's been saying. Okay, thank you anyway. And then it goes on, and all these people, all these animals say, no, I haven't seen your hat. And he thanks them, thank you anyway. And then he says, nobody has seen my hat. What if I never see it again? What if nobody ever finds it? My poor hat, I miss it so much. And then this deer says, what does your hat look like? And the bear says, it's red and pointy. And all of a sudden, he has a breakthrough. He says, I have seen my hat. Anyway, he goes chasing after the rabbit with the hat. And the next thing you know is he's wearing his hat. And he says, I love my hat. And the next question is, someone says, excuse me, have you seen a rabbit wearing a hat? And the bear says, no, why are you asking me? I haven't seen him. I haven't seen any rabbits anywhere. I would not eat a rabbit. Don't ask me any more questions. Okay, thanks anyway. So this is a very sophisticated, what happened to the rabbit? I probably wouldn't read this to very young children, but for third graders or second graders, this is so exciting when they say, he ate the rabbit. And it's a wonderful book to dramatize, to have one person be the bear, and then either one person or many people being all the other animals, including the rabbit, and read this in a paired situation. One person reads and the other person reads what the animal says. And this is a virtue of repetitive books, that they're easy to dramatize and they're fun. And then they're repetitive and they lower the affective filter. They make kids feel that they can do it. They can learn to read, they can learn to write, they can learn to speak whatever language they want to. So now I am going to attempt to go back to my PowerPoint, and I'm going to share the screen.
You can do
And
it.
here we are.
Yay.
Yay! I did it. My affective filter is going way down. Okay. So it's not moving again.
There we go.
Now
It
it's
moved.
moved. So this is another famous name, Reuben Feuerstein. And this is what parents can do. Talk about everything. Basically, Reuben Feuerstein's whole methodology is that we have to give kids experiences and talk them through it. Reuben Feuerstein was the head of education in the new country of Israel, where kids were coming from all over the world with them without schooling. And he said, we have to change things. We have to give them experiences. Everybody has similar experiences, and we have to talk them through them. So not only will they get concepts, they will also get the vocabulary. Another thing that talking through experiences develops is auditory memory. So you remember what you hear. And auditory memory is one of the best predictors of reading. That you can remember words, you can remember sentences, you can remember what you hear. Another one of his pieces of his philosophy is we have to identify and celebrate strengths while we remediate the deficits. And I find that, you know, we're kind of in a deficit mode. Oh, this kid has this wrong and this wrong. Let's look for the strengths and celebrate them. Everybody has strengths, but often they are buried by the kid himself with preoccupation with the deficits. All right, so this is all language. We start with listening comprehension, which is receptive language. And babies do that while they're in their cribs. They are listening, listening, listening. And they're forcing you to speak to them. So that when you look over the cradle, they're looking at your eyes, but at about 6 months, they're looking at your mouths to see what's coming out and to try to make sense of that. But they're not talking. They have a silent period. And this goes on with second language learning as well. They're listening, they're watching. That's why it's important for second language learners to be able to see your face and your lips. It's a problem with a mask. And then there's expressive language and vocabulary development. And babies and English language learners, second language learners, start with labels. Pen. Babies don't start saying, you know, Dada is a lawyer. They say Dada, Mama, baby, bottle. And then they start putting those things into phrases. And then they start putting them, and then when you do all this mediated experience, they develop expressive fluency. And then when they're taught reading, they start with not paragraphs and books, they start with sounds and words and phrases, and the same thing with writing. Kids write their sounds in letters, then they write words, then they write phrases, then they write sentences, and then they write the great American novel, right?
I have a question. I'm sorry
Yes.
for me interrupting. In that last screen, were we doing one last poll, or are we all done with polls? I just wanted to make sure. Could be my mistake.
The last poll was yes.
So we do have one.
Take the last poll because
Yes.
we're talking about reading.
Yeah.
Thank you, Holly. We
Thank
do have
you.
one more poll. And so the last poll for tonight is, do your children read and write in their home language? Do your children read and write in their home language? And we're seeing a mix of answers here. It looks like the vast majority of folks are saying yes, but I think that also makes sense given that a lot of folks attending here answered that their primary home language was English. But we are getting about 25% of families who are saying, no, our children don't read and write in their home language.
So the reason I asked this question is if you have the 4 modalities of language, listening, speaking, reading, and writing, you come to a second language with more skill. Now, if your children are young, there is no expectation that they should be reading and writing in any language. around the world, and all the research indicates that children learn to read and write best in any language between the ages of 6 and 8. So if your kids are not 6 years old yet, don't expect them to read and write in any language. But if your children read and write in any language, they will bring those additional skills to a second language. And a linguist once told me that he thought that the optimum time to move to a new country or move to another language was after first or second grade, when you knew how to read, but the reading that you had to do in your second language wasn't like physics or something, that it was, low-level reading that you could transition to. So that's, if you're planning on moving to another country after first or second grade, it's kind of hard to manage, but that would be ideal. So, I mean, this is the progression of language development, and we cannot, expect kids to, you don't expect babies to be speaking in full sentences, and we shouldn't expect second language learners to be doing the same. We start with labels, phrases, then we get into sentences. We're stuck again.
So click on the PowerPoint and then it should move forward.
Okay.
There we go.
Yes. So I'm just sending this out because there are many different writing systems in this world. We in English use the Roman alphabet, which looks like this. And we in English start at the top left, we go all the way to the right, and then we go back to the left. And that's the way it is. And please reinforce that in your children. I have met third graders who start writing in the middle of the page. We really cannot have that. We have to start at the top left, go to the right, back to the left, and then to the right. And we start at the top of the page. This is you can get it on the internet where I got it. It shows you how to make manuscript letters in the Roman alphabet. And so if your kids are having trouble, or if they, have gotten sloppy over the pandemic, here's a way to fix them up. This is all on the internet. You can get all kinds of alphabets. Get the simplest one and you'll be in good shape. And this particular one tells you where to start and, how to do that. One of the things that you should know is that 95% of print in English is lowercase. So the most important letters to write are the lowercase letters. And then kids should know when to use capitals, not very often, and they shouldn't be in the middle of words. These are things you can help your children with. And just by not, you don't have to be a dragon, just a reminder. And I am a parent. Fortunately, my son is 32 years old, so I don't have to remind him about this anymore. He doesn't even live here. This is his old room. But, reminding them about little things, legible handwriting is a wonderful thing to have. And then we have BICS, the basic interpersonal communication skills that kids will learn in the playground, they'll learn in class, they'll get them. CALP is the cognitive academic language proficiency, the language of books. And one of the interesting things about the language of books is the more technical it is, the more it exists similarly in many languages. It is easier to translate a medical journal than to translate a novel, because the language of medicine is a very high level, and it's all Latin and Greek. And it's the same in most languages. Like orthodontics is ortodontia in Spanish. Very close. Whereas braces are frenos, not very close at all. So the higher the level, the more it exists in multiple languages. But so your kids will get the language of books. The language, they will get the interpersonal communication, but you'll have to help them, and the teacher will have to help them with cognitive academic, with CALP. And that is also the language of subjects. There's a language of art, a vocabulary that is used in art. There's a vocabulary that is used in science. There's a vocabulary for math. There's a vocabulary for history. And the more you can talk with your kids to develop that vocabulary, the better off they'll be. I actually once visited a preschool where 4-year-olds in art class were talking about the horizon line and negative space and perspective. It was May. Their art teacher had been talking about that since September, and they had internalized that vocabulary. She didn't do it with a word wall. She did it by talking to them as they were doing their art. And that is what Reuven Feuerstein is talking about. So I showed you one picture book. I believe that Dr. Seuss was studying a foreign language when he wrote Green Eggs and Ham. The story of English is in this book. So here we go. I'm going to skip pages. So I am Sam. Present tense. Sam, I am. Reverse present tense, to get your attention, like Toys R Us. Why didn't they say we are toys? Because you wouldn't pay attention. Toys R Us makes you pay attention. And then that Sam, I am. I do not like that Sam, I am. Negative. Do you like green eggs and ham? A question. I do not like them, Sam, I am. Would you like them here or there? Very interesting. Them is a pronoun that refers to green eggs and ham, and here and there are relational terms. And then we go on. Sam says, would you, conditional, would you eat them in a box? Would you eat them with a fox? Not in a box, not with a fox. I would not eat them here or there. I would not eat them anywhere. Would you, could you? Another conditional. I would not, could not, in a car. You may like them. Another questionable thing. You may like them. I would not, could not. A train, could you, would you, on a train, not on a train, not in a tree, not in a car. Let me be. Well, these are prepositions, and a linguist friend of mine who speaks 3 or 4 languages said the hardest thing, of course, is preposition. And just these 2 little phrases. So why do we say in a car and on a train? That doesn't make sense, but that's why you can't make it up. That's why you have to learn the language. You just have to accept it. We're in a car and we're on a train. And that makes me crazy in Spanish. Do I say por or para or sobre or en? I mean, those are the things that make you crazy because you can't make them up. And then we have another thing. Sam, if you will let me be, I will try them. An if clause, very, very tricky. And then he decides he likes them and he will eat them and he will do everything. I do so like green eggs and ham. Thank you, Sam, I am. And so one of the things about this book is the story of English is pretty much in this book. It is a much easier language to learn than many other languages, apart from the vocabulary. We have a very simple sentence structure. I will not. We have a very simple future tense, will. We have a very simple past tense. We add ed on the end. We don't have 6 different forms. And so the mechanics of English are quite easy, but it's the vocabulary that's a killer. So the more you can do to develop vocabulary in any language, the better off your kids will be. And rhymes and repetitions, songs, nursery rhymes, tongue twisters, jingles. And for reading anything, anything, the research is that if you read a lot of anything you want, you will become a good reader and a good writer. So this summer, make sure your kids read, but let them read anything they want. And I have to tell you, I'll end with this story. When I was a principal, the single best reader in our school was a truant. He never came to school, but he was in an interesting family, and he escaped his relatives by reading night and day. They didn't know what he was reading. They didn't pay attention. Anyway, so we would lure him in for the reading test because his aunt was a teacher. And he would come in, sit down, take the test, bring, have lunch, and go home, and we wouldn't see him again. And then I would start calling the hotline. But he was always in 4 years in a row, 99th percentile, because he read all the time. And that is research-based. So if you want to know about this research, you can contact me, you can contact Luis, but we have the summer ahead of us. Let your kids read whatever they want, as long as they read a lot. Magazines, advertisements, graphic circulars from the supermarket, signs in the supermarket, whatever. They will be better readers, and they will also be better writers, because the more you look at the text, the more you see where the commas go and the spellings. And remember, punctuation is speech. When you take a breath, you have to put something in. If it's a big breath, you put in a period. If it's a short breath, you put in a comma. Sorry about, I live near a firehouse, so this is my life, fire engines and ambulances. So that's the end of my story. Oh, back to the special challenges. A sweet tooth, that has no translation. And so you have to explain it. It doesn't mean that your tooth is sweet or that you eat a lot. It means that you like to eat sweets. And then I saw this in classes where the teacher said a sweet tooth. What? None of the kids knew what a sweet tooth was. And when the teacher read the book beside himself, the kids were looking beside, right? So these are things that make no real sense. So you have to explain them. And then I told you about in the car and on the bus. And then there are these combinations that just have to go together in this order. Rice and beans. You don't usually say beans and rice. You don't say salt and pepper. You don't say white and black. You say black and white. And these are things that kind of have to be learned by repetition, by talking a lot and listening a lot. So there we are. I think I made it in time. So do we have any questions?
We do have some questions, Lavinia, and we have some multilingual questions too, which is great. So I'm gonna, the first thing is actually just a comment. Someone wrote in, I don't have a question, but I love this book, and they were referring to the book about the bear with the hat, saying, and this comment comes from a teacher who says, I used to teach inference to my L's students with this book. So the first question is actually coming from a Spanish speaking parent. I'm going to read it in Spanish and then I'll read it in English. So, yo en casa, yo solo le hablo español a mi niño, pero él me responde en inglés para su aprendizaje. Eso podría afectarle. And so the question is, at home, I only speak to my child in Spanish, but he responds in English. Could that affect their learning?
Just accept it. If you want to be a dragon, force him to speak in Spanish. But we talked about different modalities. He is receptive. He understands you perfectly. And you are receptive because you understand his English perfectly. So if you want to insist, then you have to pick your battles. It probably won't affect him. I've seen this so many times where grandma just speaks Spanish, but can understand the grandson, and the same thing. And so this is a very common pattern, and you have to decide whether you want to accept it or you want to force him to speak Spanish to keep up his Spanish. He will have different skills. Because there are many people who understand a second language or another language, who understand Spanish, but do not feel comfortable speaking it, and certainly don't, and can read it, but don't feel comfortable writing it. Or some people feel more comfortable writing it, like me, because I know what I'm writing. I know those words, but when I read Neruda, I have to get into his head, and that is a very hard head to get into. So these are different language patterns, and you just have to decide what's important to you. Is it important for your child to speak Spanish? Then you have to be a dragon.
Yeah, I feel like I have a personal anecdote to this because I definitely had a dragon growing up, right? And surprisingly, it was not my grandmother. My mom was my dragon, but I remember being part of a Spanish speaking family, how my mom, there are definitely times where she'd be like, she would ask me a question in Spanish, and then I would answer in English. And she would say, no, en español. And she would just not respond to me until I spoke into Spanish. And my grandmother, on the other hand, like, she learned English by me answering in English. Like, she knows English. She won't speak it, but she knows it enough to understand. But I will say, on the other end, as someone who learned English later in life as well, the same thing happened with my mom when I was learning English. So it started off as a thing of like, she would ask me a question in English, I would have to answer her in English. And even though it was our broken English, it was still something. And then it became a thing of like, I don't want you to lose Spanish. So now you have to answer me in Spanish. So there's definitely kind of like this mixed approach that is felt in a lot of our multilingual families. Let's see. What books
Actually,
go ahead.
another person I know who found out later that her mother read and spoke English quite well. Her mother would say, "Oh, I can't read English. You have to read this to me." Or, "I don't have my glasses." When the kid finally decided that her mother knew how to read English, her mother would say, "I don't have my glasses. You have to read this to me." So that forced her to read.
So one person is asking, what books are best for those with expressive delays?
I am a big fan of picture books and repetitive books. And I'm very old, but someone reminded me that those commercials from when I was young were so repetitive that we still know them 50 years later. Winston tastes good, like a cigarette should. That was drummed into our brains from the television. And so repetitive language all together and on the bus, in the car, those things, those phrases are very important, but repetition, that's how we learn language. We can't make it up. We have to just repeat it and keep repeating it. And start with labels, and then phrases, and then sentences, and then a long story.
Lavinia, thank you so much for joining us again and for sharing. I'm going to share my screen for a little while because I want to share some things with families and some announcements before we end. The first thing that I want to share with you all is that we are hosting a special education family forum. And I'll share my screen with you all right now. Give me 1 second. Oh, and there's if you folks give me one more
I
second.
just want to say,
Yep,
can I
go
say
ahead.
one more thing?
You absolutely can,
Never
Lavinia.
say, I learned this as a teacher. Never say don't. Just make the right model. Like if a kid says this is pink, don't say no, it's not pink. You say it's orange. Because when you say don't, you're reinforcing, like don't say ain't or don't say that curse word. You're reinforcing the thing you don't want to be reinforced. So just say it the right way and just move on.
Thanks for that, Lavinia. So I'm sharing with you all. What am I sharing with everyone?
Your screen.
Do you all see the family forum screen?
Not yet.
Oh, sorry. Technology is not my friend today, everyone. How about now?
Yay.
Thank you, Holly. So we're hosting the Special Education Family Forum. This is the first time we do this. It is a family conference for families of children with IEPs or families who are interested in learning more about the IEP process. So it's May 20th from 3 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. Registration is free. I dropped the link into the website. You can go in now, you can register. As you can see, the agenda's on here. So we're gonna have sessions in different tracks. We have an intro track for anyone who wants to just learn about special education for the first time. We have a toolkit building track for families who want to learn and build their toolkit. We have a discussion panel track where we talk with folks from community partners, community advocates, parent leaders. So we have all of these sessions, and it's even though we've organized them into tracks, it's a choose your own journey type of day. So you can attend one session from each track or all sessions in one track. Also, you'll see in the site that we have a list of really like dynamic DOE speakers from all over the place. So please feel free to go in, register, and share with friends. And so that takes me to my normal spiel of the evening for closing, where folks who after this session, you'll receive tomorrow an email with a link, but at this time, instead of 3 things, it's going to be 4 things. The first will be a link to the survey. So please take a moment and fill out that survey. It helps us plan, it helps us improve the series. The second will be a link to the recording of tonight's session. So you'll be able to access it, watch it again, share it with families. The third will be a link to the next session for next week. And then the fourth thing will be the link to the family forum so that you can please register and also share it with your friends, your networks. I'm really excited to be able to host a forum this year, but we really need all of your partnership to make sure this is a success so that we can continue to not only do Beyond Access, but also continue to do the family forum. So please register and get your friends to register. With that being all the announcements I have for today, thank you everyone for joining again. And until next time, stay safe and we'll see you all soon. Have a wonderful night.